Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a casual review, a series where I test and review popular games so you can decide if you want to try them out. In this video, we're going to be diving into Guild Wars 2 and discussing how the game presents itself to new players. Boy, this is going to be a tough review. Everything about this game is worthy of being called a top 5 MMORPG, but I personally had a hard time getting lost in it like I have with games like Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft. There's just something about the structure of it that doesn't capture my attention for longer periods of time, even though technically it has everything I love in MMOs. But I'll save that for the opinion part of the review. First up, let's talk about the game itself and the features. By the way, if you want to go ahead and show the channel some love, leave a like and comment, or subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I appreciate your support. Guild Wars 2 is a true MMORPG, throwing you into a large world with other players and giving you plenty of ways to collect loot, get stronger, accomplish random tasks, and kill things in large quantities. One of the first things you'll notice about Guild Wars 2 is its artistic graphics style. Every cutscene backdrop, the colors of places you run through, the vast openness of the large maps with horizons flushed in a faded light. It gives you a feeling of being inside a watercolor painting or some sort of hand-drawn illustration, as if the characters and locations around you are being seen through the eyes of someone reading a storybook legend that you happen to be the main character of. Even character creation is done with story in mind, giving you the opportunity to create your backstory, which will determine how you begin your personal journey to meet up with the main story. Stepping into this world is a breath of fresh air. It's bright, colorful, incredibly dense with trees and grasses, rolling hills and mountains, caves and lakes, rivers, swamps, deserts, and underwater passageways, and the environments are filled with people, animals, monsters, and soldiers. Events are constantly triggering around you, whether there are players there or not, and the area changes because of it. Sometimes the centaurs beat the soldiers and take over the camp. Sometimes, if there are players there to beat the centaurs back, the soldiers maintain their control over the camp. To me, this is the game's strongest attribute, its world. No matter what part of the main story you are on, the inhabitants of the land are going about their day, making trouble or protecting their land. Enemies are moving around, attacking outposts or caravans, and it doesn't take having a player accepting a quest to trigger the event. Just like the real world, events happen whether or not you are there to influence the outcome. Gameplay-wise, this is incredibly smart for replayability. Sometimes completing these events are trivial, and sometimes there are big boss fights that take groups of players to complete. Higher level players will come back to lower level zones to take part in these events for whatever reward they may get for helping out. This means that new players won't always have a hard time finding help for more difficult events. I took part in plenty of events, and there were only a few where I was alone in completing them. GW2 also uses a dynamic level adjustment system, which basically means that your character's level is brought down to whatever level range the content for that zone is. It doesn't scale up, only down, so you still have to level your character to get to more difficult content. For example, if you're level 30 but you're still in the starting zone, your level and therefore your stats is adjusted to fit the area, so about level 5 to 8. Again, this is another system that makes replayability possible and keeps old content fresh. You can't outlevel a zone, which means you can't outlevel and overpower all the content. So far, most of the content has been pretty easy, but there are times, especially in events with world bosses, where I would have been easily killed had I not been with a group of players. The world is segmented into zones, connected by loading screens, with each zone spanning huge distances, and is densely populated with things to do. For every zone, there are vistas, renown hearts, points of interest, and hero challenges. Vistas are basically spots around the map that you need to run to or complete a jump puzzle for. Each time you reach a vista, you get a short cutscene of the area around you and its beauty. It's always awesome to see the camera pan out on these maps. Everything is just so beautiful. Renown hearts are basically areas with a set list of tasks to complete to help a certain NPC and unlock them as a vendor. These are reminiscent of traditional questing in other MMORPGs like World of Warcraft. The cool thing about Renown hearts, though, is that you get to choose from the list of tasks and do whatever you want in order to fill the completion heart. Once you fill the heart, you complete the quest, get a bunch of loot and XP, and then move on to the next area. Points of interest are your exploration tracker. These are important areas on the map that you can travel to and explore, and once you do, you unlock the point of interest and get a bit of XP. Lastly, you have the hero challenges. Hero challenges are basically events that you can find in the world that test your combat or your exploration or something of the sort. If you complete the challenge and prove yourself a hero, you get a hero point, which can be spent on your abilities. You can also collect fast travel points, which you can spend small amounts of currency to travel to. These are the only things on this list that are almost mandatory, since you'll be traveling across these large maps quite a bit, regardless of what you're doing. While the main story is your driving factor to go from one zone to the next, I found myself more inclined to collect and finish all these side objectives. I don't know if it was just an OCD thing, but I didn't even attempt the main story quest until I had already completed everything in the first 2 zones. By the 3rd zone, I was like, okay, maybe I should start playing the rest of the game or I will never get to this review. But side note, look how fun it was to race these beetle mounts, speeding around a huge open map over hills and stuff. I feel like for this, GW2 thought, does it make sense? But is it hilariously entertaining? Yes. Okay, put it in the game. I also like how this side stuff is in low-level zones. Like, they didn't shove all the fun stuff into higher-level zones as a reward for leveling up or reaching endgame. There are fun, random things to do at every level. Your main objectives come in the form of a main story quest that, at least for the first 30 or so levels, is unique to the race and backstory that you picked. I won't give away any spoilers, but to give a small summary of what you do in these main story quests, you basically run from location to location, enter a small personal instance to complete the main quest on your own or with a party, and watch short talking scenes that are wonderfully voice acted. A+ for voice actors, by the way. The main human commander, Logan Thackeray, is voiced by Troy Baker, a talented voice actor known for, along with many other things, playing Joel in The Last of Us. I will say that so far the story quests, as interesting and interactive as they can be, don't feel too engaging or exciting. They are extremely quick and can be completed without much difficulty, so while it plays out like a story and gives you a driving force to move around the maps, it doesn't feel any more important than just going out and clearing quests or vistas or collecting hero points. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy them. The main quests give context to the world and my place in it, which I always love. I'm the type of player that reads quest texts in MMOs. Last thing I wanted to talk about is the Dungeon Finder, which is really just a group finder, because there is one in the game apparently. I got to level 30, which is the minimum for the first dungeon, and I tried to queue for the Dungeon Finder or join someone's group. Anytime I looked, there didn't seem to be many people looking for dungeon groups, so I ended up not completing a dungeon, which is incredible to me, since dungeons are the focus of so many other MMOs, especially while leveling. That is until I got to level 40 and I started to write this review, where I was like, no, I can't write a first impressions review and not do a dungeon. That's sacrilegious in the MMORPG genre. So I tried again and I got lucky. 2 whole groups were starting. So I joined one and I did a dungeon, I think. We killed about 5 bosses and 1 big boy boss so fast that I really didn't get to use my abilities or figure out what combat skills work best. So I kind of just spammed my abilities until the enemies fell over. We had a level 303 person in our group, so we were being led really quickly through the dungeon to the point where he actually told us which waypoint to quick travel to in order not to run back. Like, he knew that noobs would take too long to figure out how to read a map, and he just wanted to get the dungeon over and done with. Can't blame him though. This is exactly what happens when low-level dungeons become stupidly easy and can be sped through without any thought. To be fair though, I did die. These fire traps got me like 3 times. I felt unintelligent. Anyway, low-level dungeons, not the best. But there's so much else to do that I never really felt inclined to do them. It's not like they gave too much better gear than what I was getting outside of the dungeons, and I was leveling so fast that gear was pretty meaningless anyway, and it was getting replaced almost immediately. So it falls under the same level of importance as pretty much everything else I've encountered in the game so far. And that's kind of the intended design of the game, I think. No content completely outshines everything else. Everything you do counts towards your progression, so no matter what you do, you can still level up and reach the higher difficulty content. This is because Guild Wars 2 is designed around horizontal progression instead of vertical progression. This has been a common topic recently, but for those of you who don't know what horizontal progression is, Guild Wars 2 is the best example. Horizontal progression is a way to design a game's reward system to allow for many different factors to affect one character's progression. It puts more emphasis on the player's choice of what they find fun, but still allows that player to get the same level of reward as other players who choose another path of progression. For example, if your character can gain the same experience by completing jumping puzzles as they could by completing the main story quest, then it's up to you to decide what you find more fun. Another example would be if you receive 2 different looking weapons for either winning an armored fashion show or completing a raid, but the power of both weapons were the same. In this case, if you competed in the fashion show, you may get one weapon and love the look of it, but you wouldn't be any less powerful than the player who completed the raid and got the other one. The rewards may look different, but function the same. The basic elements of horizontal progression are player choice and content variety. However, the biggest downside to horizontal progression is that if everything is equal, then there really isn't a clear direction as to where the player is supposed to go, which to a lot of players is a negative. If the choice is up to you, then you have to be willing to provide your own sense of direction, which in video games may be hard for some people to do. In vertical progression-based games, the direction is usually pretty clear. Take World of Warcraft, the epitome of vertical progression. If you want to level up and reach the endgame, which is the most prominent content, you need to complete quests, get the best and most powerful gear through dungeons and high-level questing, and then gather all of the best in slot gear so that you can be powerful enough to last in a raid or battleground. The path to game completion is pretty clear, and there aren't many other goals in the game because the focus of World of Warcraft has always been its high difficulty endgame. Then, when the next expansion comes out, the old content is made irrelevant because you need to progress your power even higher to beat the new endgame content. This is another element that Guild Wars 2 designed with horizontal progression in mind. When an expansion comes out, new content is added, but old content is still relevant. The player can still choose to go back to lower level zones, especially with the dynamic level scaling, and complete any content they like. It'll remain the same difficulty and provide relevant rewards because all content completion can net you the same level of reward. This isn't supposed to be a video on progression and reward design, but I think it's pretty important to talk about when we review Guild Wars 2. This will be a big factor when you decide whether or not to give the game a try. Some people will like the freedom, others will be lost in it. But one thing is for sure, no matter what you do in this game, you are playing it correctly. And for an MMORPG, that's an extremely hard thing to pull off. Alright, let's talk about some mechanics. First up, combat. Oh, how the combat system confuses me. Some things about it I love, and other things, mainly the way it controls, I absolutely do not care for. The great thing about combat is its uniqueness. You have a class, which gives you class abilities that you can level into with hero points. These hero points are given to you with each level and can be earned through hero challenges around the map. Along with your abilities, you can take GW2's version of talents, which alter your abilities even further. This is your specialization. On top of this, every class has certain weapons they can equip, and when they equip different weapons, they receive unique weapon abilities. Weapon abilities will change depending on which weapon is in your main hand versus your offhand versus having a two-handed weapon equipped. This was super cool, and it gave me so much to play around with when thinking of what type of Mesmer, which is like an illusionist class, I wanted to be. You can also switch weapons on the fly during combat, so you basically have two sets of weapon abilities to toggle between. So the combat has a lot of depth to it, and I love that. But here's where the combat loses me. The movement is extremely floaty. It sounds like such a small issue, and I know that people probably get used to it or have ways to make it work for them, but it took me 40 levels to really get used to fighting enemies when I couldn't properly move around them. This is definitely my fault. I'm used to a certain style of movement that games like Final Fantasy XIV and WoW have, and it just didn't translate too well for me in GW2. It's really close, and all the controls are basically the same, but I had a really hard time getting used to how the characters turn. I ended up using my mouse to move my character left or right, because a lot of the time I would end up running into walls waiting for my character to make a 90-degree turn. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing this is because Guild Wars 2 feels like it has a small speed ramp up when your character changes direction. When you turn left or right, there's a small time frame where you ramp up your speed. If you look closely, you can see the camera moves slow at first and then speeds up significantly once the top turn speed kicks in. The crazy thing is, I'm pretty sure this is only happening to the camera. The character doesn't seem to have any speed ramp up, they just turn rather wide, but the camera ramps up its speed. So it kind of just confused me a bit and made it a little bit more difficult to control my character. Anyway, I'm getting too technical again, but my point is that the floaty movement makes combat feel floaty as well. Especially for melee weapons, it's not easy to strafe or move around the target without straying too far to where your abilities are out of range, and since changing direction is a bit more difficult, you have to get really used to moving with your mouse if you want to make tight turns around the enemy. But everything I just said doesn't really matter too much for the first 45 levels or so. I haven't really gotten to the point where anything has been too difficult. Combat has been extremely easy, and nothing I've done has taken more than 20 minutes really. I've played for over 20 hours on this character and got to level 48 pretty easily, and I was really taking my time exploring and doing heart quests, so I'm pretty sure the lower levels can go by pretty fast if you're trying to get to max level, which is 80 by the way. As for professions, GW2 has professions, and that's pretty much all I can say about that. Again, nothing in the game was all that difficult, so I didn't really need professions to provide any support. It would have only been necessary if I wanted it to be, and just wanted to get through content even faster than I already was. The profession I really wanted to try was cooking, but it required me to go out and look for specific ingredients off of monsters. The problem was that I was killing things so quickly and moving through content so fast that I never really stopped to level my cooking at a cooking station. So my cooking level stayed pretty low and I never learned any new recipes. But one cool thing GW2 does with cooking is allow you to discover recipes you haven't learned yet by combining random ingredients from your inventory. Even better is that no matter what profession you have, if you pick up any items that can be used as ingredients or materials, you can deposit them into a separate storage so it doesn't take up any inventory space. Crafting as a whole seems to be more of a max level thing, or maybe I'm just not understanding the benefits because I don't really need anything yet. Last but not least, I tried PvP. I tried PvP. It was fun, but man, was it hectic. It was only 5v5, but it felt like so much more. I can't even begin to describe the confusion I had in my first couple of matches. I understood the game mode obviously, but it was the combat. Again, up until this point, I had really just been spamming abilities with a basic understanding of how my class works. But now I was being queued with veteran players who knew what the best build class combination is for this patch and how their abilities can be specifically used in the 5v5 arena mode. Basically, it doesn't seem like there's much of a matchmaking system to put me with other noobs. Everyone is brought up to level 80, so you would think that everyone is on level playing field, but knowledge of the game and skill with your class isn't something the game can give you, so I'm thrown right into the fray, and it's up to me to figure out how to live longer than 5 seconds in a fight. Granted, I don't expect to be an expert after playing the game for a couple weeks, I just wish there was a way to fight people around my skill level. That way I could learn and not be in the same bucket as people who gangbang me as I'm lying helpless on the floor. I eventually did win, so it was nice to see the victory screen, even though I probably played a very minor part in getting the win. I also tried the World vs. World mode, and this was cool, I think. I don't know if I spawned in a battlefield that was pretty much already dominated or what was happening. The World vs. World looks like a huge open world battle with 3 different factions that you can fight for. You take outposts and bases by fighting PvE monsters, but opposing factions can PvP with you to keep you from completing objectives. I actually ended up killing a boss and capturing a base with a couple people on my team, so that was pretty fun. It's a really cool idea, and I wish I knew more about how to get involved with this. Alright, now it's time to go a bit more freeform and tell you how I felt playing GW2 for the review. GW2 is extremely fun in small doses. The world grabs you and makes you want to explore, but the leveling content doesn't really have any kick to it to make it exciting for long periods of time. I think GW2 has the same problem that a lot of MMORPGs are facing today: content bloat. And it affects new players the most because someone coming in is going to be blindsided by all the options presented to them, and this is kind of made worse by the horizontal progression design. As a new player, you unlock things extremely quickly, with only the very basics being taught to you. And because you're leveling up so fast, you don't have much time to get used to what you have before you level up again and unlock something new. So by the time I was level 50, I had more questions than answers on some of the features in the game. Let me be clear though, you can definitely learn over time. It's not like these different features are extremely complex, it just takes time to learn them. This wouldn't be a problem for me at all if new players were introduced to these features with a bit more direction as how to engage with them, but it seems more like new players have to understand years of development and content on their own all at once. Or rather, they don't have to understand it, they can choose to engage with it or not. Guild Wars 2 allows you to forge your own path to level 80, choose from a crazy amount of options for progression, but for me, getting blasted with 10 years of content without much time to understand any of it before new content is thrown at me means I'm constantly playing catch up and trying to figure out what I should do next. I personally spend a lot of time playing video games, so I know I'll keep playing. I'll get to level 80 and figure out more of what the game has to offer, but for those new players who don't have time to figure that stuff out, they may feel lost or left behind by the rapid oncoming content wave. I think playing Guild Wars 2 has helped me understand how I personally play video games. I learned I'm an objective-based player that needs a small push before I can take off on my own. I like seeing progress and overcoming challenges that are thrown at me, but I need the game to tell me, hey bud, you should really try out this piece of content. Here's how you do it, now go have fun. And then eventually I don't need the hand-holding, I can figure things out on my own. But if I don't have that base knowledge, then I disconnect from that part of the content completely. I think that's why the exploration was so much fun for me. There's nothing you really need to understand about exploring a beautiful world and completing jumping puzzles to collect a vista point. You kinda just do it. But I didn't have as much fun trying PvP or completing dungeons, for example, because I didn't really understand any of the combat mechanics at a level that would be competitive. I didn't know how much damage I was supposed to be doing or how to optimize my weapon and class abilities to do proper damage. None of that was necessary to complete the PvE content while I was leveling, so I just didn't take the time to learn it. I just sort of hit abilities off cooldown and relied on my basic understanding of what each spell did. Long story short, new players are bombarded with options to the point where analysis paralysis may set in. If they do find their way to something they want to try, they'll need to spend a lot of time with that part of the game to properly understand it. And if they don't properly understand that part of the game, they won't fully understand the reward that's given to them. And if new players aren't feeling rewarded for their time invested, they may not stick with the game long enough to understand it. It's hard to critique Guild Wars 2 right now because just like every other MMO, I feel like it would take months or years for me to fully understand the game, but you're watching this video to see if I think you should play Guild Wars 2 or not. I know I've spent a good portion of this video complaining about the game, but actually yes, of course you should play Guild Wars 2. I think the exploration and the world itself is worth it on its own. running around the map and taking part in dynamic events, finding secrets and solving jump puzzles. That joy cannot be understated. The main story is actually also a joy to complete, even if the combat portions of the mission are super short and easy, and PvP seems like it can be really fun once you figure things out a bit more. My advice to anyone trying out this game, just stick with it. Don't worry if you feel like you're not playing Guild Wars 2 the right way, because it doesn't seem like there is a right way at all. You can literally do whatever you want and you'll be progressing towards some sort of reward. Try everything, fail fast and keep learning, and eventually you'll look up and realize that you're level 48. You can get a few kills in PvP, no problem. Exploration is just as fun and rewarding in each new zone, and of course, you were supposed to stop playing 4 hours ago. I would be curious to hear some of your stories of Guild Wars 2. If any of you have tips for me as I continue my journey to level 80, or if you outright hate this game and wish you never played it. Whatever it is, leave your comments down below. But most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you liked it and subscribe for more content. I hope you enjoy your Tyrian adventures, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next.